I would like now to introduce today's presenter, Rohiteshwar Agarwal, Vice President. He is a leader in Everest Group's global sourcing practice. In his role, Rohiteshwar is focused on engagements and initiatives with global companies that focus on GBS shared services centers. Bharat M., Vice President, is a member of Everest Global Sourcing Practice, where he leads Everest Group's Global Business Services, GBS, Charter for Healthcare and Life Sciences, Retail and Consumer Packaged Goods, CPG, and Professional Services verticals. Anish Agarwal, Practice Director, is a member of the Global Sourcing team. In his role, he focuses on engagements and initiatives with global companies that focus on global business services, GBS, shared services growth and evolution strategy. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Rohiteshwar.
Thanks, Rafael. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. As we start with the discussion today, we really want some data points that help us establish how, despite whatever we are seeing in the market, talent remains one of the top challenges for global business leaders. As of today, more than 70% of the GBS leaders are struggling to hire high quality talent. The time to hire, the ability to engage and retain talent, it is all a big challenge. You can see some of the statistics out there. What is most important is that we are increasingly hearing GBS organization needing to reinvent their employee value proposition. What we'll be doing today is that we have divided the session into 3 parts for you. So in the first part, we are going to share some of our very new, first of its kind analysis on the GBS industry. I'm very excited about this. We have very comprehensively studied feedback on GBS organizations, which is provided by their current, existing, or ex-employees. And we have put it together in a model to show relatively how are different organizations performing as employers in this particular market. We are very happy to be announcing for the first time the results today in this webinar, which will be followed up by a launch of our detailed report on this. In the second part, we will go deeper into some of the feedback areas and decipher on what are the specific actions that companies take which attracts high potential candidates. What do these leading employers do differently? And towards the end, we will take some questions. We have already received a long list of questions from some of you. And during the entire session, feel free to add questions in the Q&A window, and we'll take some of them towards the end of the session. So let's get started.
Hey, as we get started, let's start with a poll. This is an interesting question. So for all you leaders, which of the following do you believe is the most overlooked GBS employee attractiveness dimension? Choose one option among the list. Yes, we've got career development and progression, compensation benefits, focus on culture and values, flexibility, especially in a post-COVID world, this has become a critical element, work-life balance, impact of leadership, and of course, one of the most important dimensions around diversity and inclusion. Yeah. Rohit, I know we've been interacting with quite a few GBS organizations, and all of these definitely come out as critical elements as organizations look to build a value proposition for employees and ensure that the experience is right on top. As we receive the poll questions, poll responses. Also curious to hear from you. In your opinion, where do you see these elements coming through? Yeah. Then maybe also look at some of the poll results.
Always very interesting to see this, Bharat, and all the diversity in responses. We'll uncover what some of the leading companies are doing differently, but I see more than 70% of our participants have already responded, and I am surprised, to be honest. I'm surprised to see that culture and value, diversity, inclusion, leadership, impact continue to be where they are. I'm not surprised that they are towards the lower end, but really surprised that they are as low as they are right now. Career development and progression doesn't surprise me that it's leading, followed by compensation and benefits, which is often the most talked about, but not always the most important in succeeding in this market. So thanks to everybody who voted. Really interesting to see this. Let's go ahead and look at some of the data and then some of the insights we have for you. And we'll contextualize this again once we start uncovering the results, right? Before we show you what we have done in our top GBS employers assessment, let me just talk for a minute. Why is this important? Now, the GBS organizations, and for everybody who's joining in today, we are using the term GBS, but you may be calling them shared services, captives, GTC, many different names. But if you are operating in any areas of technology, operations, corporate services, and you are an in-house delivery setup for your enterprise organization, then you probably qualify as what we call the GBS organization. So GBS organizations in this industry, as they compete with the third-party service providers, have mostly enjoyed a certain unique positioning. They are part of a larger organization. They provide global opportunities. Often they are believed to provide better working environment, global projects, better compensation. However, COVID in more than one ways was a leveler. And in one of the ways, it kind of made everyone in the services industry look at their compensation policy, look at their flexibility, look at the healthcare benefits that they are providing, mental wellness that they are focusing on, many other aspects. So what has happened is that the distinction between GBS as an employer and others as an employer has reduced. Startups continue to pose very sustained pressure. They are a real challenge to the GBS organizations in hiring talent. And thirdly, with the demand supply gap greater than it has ever been, it is just creating too much pressure. At this time, what started as a pilot for one of our clients, we have this dedicated talent excellence program where we help clients in their talent strategies. And one of our clients, a financial services organizations in the US, asked us that while they know what they are doing and how are they placed in the market, is that really an objective view? What do their prospective employees, ex-employees, current employees feel about it? So that's where what started as a pilot, we started building an outside-in proxy of how your prospective candidates might look at you when they do their research. And what came out is something that eventually shaped into this analysis that we will show today. But what is important is to take an objective view of how you are being perceived, how your brand is being perceived as a GBS employer, and baselining that against your direct and indirect peers, whoever you are competing with for talent. That has become much more important. And that's where this entire research comes into the picture, right? Without further delay, let me move on and share some of the analysis, right? So what we have done is we have compiled information which went through a fairly sophisticated assessment model, and we ranked organizations on many different parameters. We looked into the core dimensions where a workforce is, which are important to the workforce, right? We looked into what is your satisfaction grade, how do they rate organizations on compensation and benefits, work environment, career opportunities, diversity and inclusion. These dimensions are a combination of several aspects. For example, in work environment, it is about the quality of leadership, culture, values, your office setup, remote working options, flexibility, autonomy. So there are a combination of factors that are baked in here. How we did this is that we wanted this to be very objective, very unbiased from the perspective of your potential employees. So on the next slide, we have laid out very transparently all the sources that we are using. Our team have studied what is out there on sources like Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn, very extensively. There is, of course, a certain point of view that we bring in, but we have not tried to swing analysis in a particular direction. This is to a large extent very much, what the data says. But of course, where we believe that there is some sort of, we have made sure that there's no double counting or dual impact of certain areas. We have kind of normalized some things. But mostly, we have kind of collated what's out there, what your prospective employees see. And we have done this, we have brought it all together to represent you the final picture, right? Now, your employees may not be doing it in this level of depth, but we wanted it to be very much comprehensible and actionable for each of you. So as you will see in the following slide, what we have done is, and I want to set this up so that, it's kind of sets up the way how to interpret the information that flows, is that we have brought it all together to put it on 2x2s. In this industry, we love putting everything on a 2x2. So on the x-axis, you will see that we have put your brand perception of organization across all dimensions. It kind of gets translated into a weighted score, all adds up to give you a score on the x-axis. The farther along you are, the stronger the perception of an organization. On the y-axis, based on all the publicly available information, we have rated how our companies positioned in terms of how they're doing in retention. What is the employee satisfaction rating? How are they growing in terms of how many people are joining these organizations versus leaving these organizations? So in a way, this is a proxy for how are you succeeding in the market. Once again, I would like to reiterate, this is all based on view from publicly available information. Everest Group has a lot of additional information which we have kept in separate buckets. We wanted this to be from the view of your employees, prospective employees. And just to elaborate on how the data gets used, right? For example, the employee satisfaction grade, based on the Glassdoor rating of how likely are employees to recommend their organization to their friends and their peers, we have kind of translated those ratings on the percentage score into a certain ranking, and that ranking kind of feeds up into the overall analysis. Similarly, for each of the dimension, by a combination of factors, kind of, the analysis adds up. With that fairly long monologue on describing how this works, let me unveil the results. For India, we studied, by the way, we studied 3 top geographies: Philippines, India, and Poland, which are one of 3 of the largest GBS markets, offshore nearshore markets. Starting with India, where we studied almost 100 organizations, I'm very happy to congratulate some of the leading employers, the top 20 that you see. And that's the structure you will see, right? Like I said, the further along you are on x-axis, the stronger your brand perception. Further along you are on y-axis, relatively more successful you are right now. And every company is represented by a unique dot. These are colored based on your industry, wherein you operate. The top 20 organizations that you'll see, there is a mix of retail CPG, followed by some technology companies, banking companies. There are 1 or 2 pharma companies, and their insurance starts to show up. So really a mix. But what we have also seen is that there is a fairly good scatter, with some of the tech or CPG companies relatively ahead of others. And then there are some banking organizations that pop up. Once again, congratulations to all the leaders. To clarify, by way of this research, that report that will get published, we are going to celebrate the companies which are in the top quadrant, but we are working with a lot of other companies to help them get specific feedback on where you are, why you are ahead, why you are back, and some of the aggregated feedback areas we are going to share in the session later today as well. On the next slide, we also wanted to double click on the top 10 organizations and just show what differentiates them. As you will see, most of these companies have strong rating across multiple dimensions, but across work environment, career development, diversity, these are the standout factors. Compensation is high for most of these companies, not necessarily on the highest side. And again, this is perception. I want to be very clear. We are not saying you pay the best. Some other organizations might be paying more, but this is the perceptions which could be based on changes in compensations, the structure of that compensation policy, many other factors. But this is what your employees are, rating you on. So that's the India picture. We have done this at an overall GBS level, and then specifically for IT organizations, we are only showing you some results today. Of course, the report is available for more detailed readouts, but let's go on and look at some of the other locations as well and unveil the top employers in Poland and Philippines.
Yeah, pretty interesting. As we look at this in Philippines, right? In India, we had looked at about 100 organizations, Philippines, about 50 of them. Again, a similar trend, you see a scatter plot moving on the diagonal more towards the right top side. Some of the key factors that we were also uncovering as we did the analysis is, hey, how does the overall scatter plot really look like when you compare one geography versus the other? Again, this is more of a perception, but just to know, do we see a skew more towards the right side, more towards the left? Are we seeing more organizations on the center? We'll see this later as well. In Philippines, generally the perception seems to be slightly higher as compared to what you've noticed in India, and as we see in the other geography, that is Poland as well. Just to take a look at the top organizations in Philippines. Yeah, the other key element that you would also start noticing is organizations are not building better employee experience in just one location. In fact, you would see some of the names that are repeating what you saw in India as well. This is more of a conscious strategy to ensure a consistent employee experience across different geographies where they operate. Again, you would also see a bunch of organizations that operate only in Philippines, and they're also emerging as the top organizations. But just don't want to discount the fact that organizations are looking at this in a more global, holistic perspective, trying to replicate success in one geography into other, bringing in learnings from one into the other, and so on. As we move on to the Poland graph as well, we would, which is similar view, but a slightly more scattered plot. One of the hypotheses that I do have is also gotten to do with the market competition in these locations. You often see more number of GBS centers, density higher in locations like India and Philippines, thereby having a need for less differences in the overall value proposition across organizations. Perhaps that could be one of the key elements. And as we uncover this later, we will see this in some more detail. Again, not surprising, if we look at the top organizations, even in Poland, you would see some of the names again repeating. Now, one of the key questions that often come, and Rohit alluded to this earlier, is, hey, we as an organization, we run our internal surveys, we do our pulse surveys. Guess what? We've been getting the highest ratings. In fact, post-COVID, we've done pretty well, and so on and so forth. Yes, that's great, but just wanted to also call out that this research is more of how an organization is being viewed by the outside market. Let's say a prospective employee wants to look up your organization and understand this is the aggregate view that they're going to get. So what we have also observed based on our interactions, and we kind of did a brainstorming internally and with few organizations that have come out in this space to understand what they did differently. One of the key takeaways is that it's important to conduct internal surveys, get a pulse of where the employees believe the organization is, but it's also important to make sure this external market perspective is taken into account, because how you're being viewed by prospects is as important, or perhaps even more.
That's powerful.
Yeah,
and that's powerful, right, Bharat? Because often at times one of the challenges we see our clients come up with is that they have a certain way of doing things and the certain belief system. It might not be inaccurate, but sometimes there is a disconnect. And that's where, as we have started sharing some of the findings with our existing clients, more one-on-one, we are seeing that it's not always that you need a policy change. Oh, you're looking bad on some area, you need to change everything. No, sometimes it might require a rethink into your policy. But at times, it might just be a communication or articulation of the benefit is not happening appropriately. At other times, there may be more noise about a certain area or more echo, both positive or negative, in certain areas. So what this is supposed to give you is voice of the market in a manner, but it requires certain degree of thinking that what sort of action and implication may come out for you. Is that a policy change or a better communication or addressing some noise around certain areas? Could be many of the things.
Yeah, or even providing an opportunity for employees to share their feedback first time. Sometimes we often see feedbacks coming out on third-party portals, but is there an opportunity for employees to do that within the organization? Is there a safe, secure way in which those feedback is gathered? So that also plays a role. And those are some of the findings that we are uncovering. The detailed report, as Rohit mentioned, contains some of those details. So this is a moment to celebrate in some ways. This is all data that's coming in directly from the sources that we mentioned in terms of how the organizations are being viewed. On the next page, we have a sample of some of the badges that we plan to recognize as well. Now, if you are among these top organizations, we would love you to share your achievements as well, and you can request a recognition badge. We will also publish from our side the top GBS employers across different geographies that we've assessed. So do keep a lookout for communication in the coming days as well. And as we also mentioned, a report is also coming up soon. This report contains a lot more details in terms of how the overall employee brand perception, employee experience is kind of being tracked across organizations. And guess what? You can also request a complementary analysis to understand, hey, where you stand with respect to the market, how your employer attractiveness is being viewed by your employees. And right now we have this for a set of geographies: US, UK, Poland, India, Philippines, and you can also include some of your peers to understand how you compare with your market as well.
And I see a lot of questions, coming in. Just to elaborate on the previous slide, I think that's a good offer. And what we wanted is that while we have analyzed more than 200 organizations to come up with this report, like Bharat was saying, that we're expanding. So there's an opportunity for each one of you to take a very specific analysis, which will only be for your eyes, to see what is your brand perception as compared to some of your direct peers in your local market. So there's a link in the chat. Use that to give your inputs. You can select one location. You can select up to 4 peers. Could be from your industry, could be somebody else you compete with, because it's not happening in those narrow pockets anymore. The competition is very secular. And we'll get back to you in the next few days with a very specific assessment report for you. We'll also show you on this big 2x2 where are you placed, and we'll be happy to do a readout for you for that report. So make sure you make the best use of this offer. And with that, I would like to pivot us into the second section of this presentation, right? And Bharat, I see there are some questions that are already popping up. So I'm getting a bit, excited to get to that part and share those answers. But before that, why don't you tell us, Bharat, that while it's great to see this come through, and celebrate the strong perception of those leading employers. And again, just to say, there is a question that is this based on only perceived view and not actual view? So no, it could be mixed. Even a lot of your current employees go out there on these public sources and share their feedback. So it is a mix of what employees have experienced and what they perceive. Your existing employees and some who have had experience with you in the past, those who might have interviewed with you or have a view of your organization. But mostly we see that this is a combination of actual experience and perception. But like you said, we are seeing that it is important to be aware about it and accordingly make conscious choices of what you want to do about it.
Yeah. So what really attracts talent? What differentiates some of these organizations that have come on top, the top 10? When we started this analysis as analysts, we also had our own hypothesis on, hey, compensation could potentially be a key element, maybe work location, some of the other benefits, and so on. What came out was much more interesting than what we started with. For example, as you see on this page, the larger size font reflects the greater frequency of that particular feedback. You would notice aspects such as strong graduate programs, strong entry-level training, entry-level compensation. We are seeing organizations that are on top go even beyond just addressing their immediate employee stack. They are looking at curating, programs in academia, looking at, building their brand and their culture even before resources start getting into the organization. And as we know, for many organizations, the first 2-3 levels of the pyramid tend to have a larger chunk of resources. Addressing that space is clearly a top priority for organizations. And as I said, it starts even before some of these resources enter the organization. We see other aspects, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, emerge as critical areas around flexible timings, good paid time off, essentially, providing the flexibility for employees to define the way how they would want to work and support the organization. Having knowledgeable, helpful co-workers, critical aspect to it. Opportunities for philanthropic initiatives. In fact, even aspects around the overall organization vision, saying, hey, is the organization committed to certain ESG goals? Is the organization looking at the broader environment in addition to the core areas that they are operating in, and so on. And as you would see, compensation is clearly not among the top aspects. It is an important aspect, but there are clearly areas over and beyond that. Now, of course, there are areas that organizations can do better as well. As we move on to the next page. Now, what really drives talent away? What are those grievances that employees have called out or prospects have called out as factors that are contributing negatively towards this whole brand perception? Again, few aspects that are coming out include having better clarity over the career path, better leadership, having the organization culture that's cutting through bureaucracy and politics, pay corrections wherever it's needed, better work-life balance. A few things that really stood out for me is the leadership element to it, having access to leadership, having a strong vision for the organization. That clearly has a huge impact. In fact, we've come across organizations over the last few years where frequent changes in GBS leadership has definitely had an impact in terms of attrition, especially for first-line managers and even some of the team leader kind of positions. Having a uniform culture, ensuring that you don't have different policies or different groups within the organization. These are all clearly emerging as very critical aspects. In fact, we looked at the top 3-4 areas that are really making a difference for organizations. And Anish, I know you've kind of done quite a bit of deeper research on this. Where do you see some of these factors now, or what do you see some of the factors that really impact the brand perception, and how does it vary between one versus the other?
So, as you mentioned, the underlying factors what attracts the talent and what potentially drives them away are pretty diverse. We wanted to understand, is there any specific lever that the top GBS employers are focusing on, or are they taking a pretty holistic view around everything and want to address everything, right? So we looked into details and identified 4 elements which we have been talking about, namely career development, compensation, work environment, and diversity, and try to understand that how does best-in-class organizations differ. So the results were pretty evident, right? So when we compare the average score versus the best-in-class, which is the top 10 in this case, you'll notice that the best-in-class organizations are leaving no stones unturned. They are doing everything which is there in their capacity to keep their talent happy and satisfied, so that they are able to retain them for a longer run. So the score is consistently higher across all the dimensions. They're looking at providing accelerated career paths. They're looking at innovating their compensation structure by offering ESOP, which again gives a sense of ownership to their employees. They're looking at creating excellent work environment, and they're also looking at tapping into the DEI aspect of talent, right? So that they have a wider diversity within the talent pool, which again becomes or adds to their employer brand perception. Specifically to call out certain notable initiatives, so around career development, right? We have noticed that one of the best-in-class GBS organization has launched dedicated online courses and even small private online courses specifically dedicated towards the entry-level talent. In the last slide you mentioned, right? There's a lot of focus on the entry-level talent, and it addresses the bulk of the pyramid, and that's where these investments are going into. If you look at the compensation front, apart from hikes and bonuses, we are noticing that few of the top GBS organizations are focusing especially on employee wellness benefits around health insurance and other coverage policies which are there. In terms of BI initiatives, again, a lot of organizations are already emphasizing the benefits of those or will be undertaking those journey as per our conversation with them. So net, best-in-class organizations are focusing around the 360 factors which are there, which you have listed on the slide. Now, let's say once we've discussed these 4 levers, right? I believe one of the important questions which arises in the minds of GBS organizations is, are there any particular industry which is leading the stack? And I guess we got this question in the chat as well. So maybe is it technology? Is it BFSI? Are there any particular observations that, okay, one industry is better than others? So as per our results, right, as per our survey which we done, as per our research, you'll notice that technology, healthcare certainly seems to be winners. They are ahead of the curve when it comes to employee satisfaction. They're closely followed by RCPG or retail CPG, which is mostly around the average. Another thing which I would like to call out is, and it was actually particularly interesting for me, that BFSI organizations have slightly relatively lower score when it comes to compensation or work environment. Not about lower, it's still around average, but then lower when compared to technology and healthcare. Possibly it might be due to the fact that they are focusing more on supplementary perks, maybe for example retirement benefits, but not so much on in-hand compensation, which directly changes the perception of the employer in the market. On the other hand, professional services, we also see an opportunity that they can catch up in terms of compensation and work environment, specifically when it comes to work-life balance. I guess they can do better and they can improve their score as compared to some of the other industries. Now, when we looked at these 4 dimensions, again, we wanted to also look in terms of, does geography play an important role? So if we move, yeah, we're already in the next slide. So we wanted to look at if geography plays an important role or function plays an important role, and that's why we took a lens of the overall GBS brand perception, which is indicated on the left-hand side chart, versus IT workforce, which is becoming one of the critical factors for all the organizations, irrespective of the industry vertical. How does that look like? So the horizontal bars in different colors represent the leading geographies, India, Philippines, and Poland. You'll notice that across most of the dimensions, right, work environment, career development, and diversity, the ratings are almost comparable with slight nuances. And as mentioned earlier, Philippines looks slightly ahead, but then largely they are in the same ballpark range, right? Compensation is one factor which slightly stands out. Again, this is not to say that the India GBS organization or the Poland GBS organizations are not paying well or they are paying lower for same complexity of work. This is just a call out that the brand perception among the employers for the same kind of work is different. So in the Philippines, employees feel that they are better compensated for the kind of work which they're delivering as compared to their Indian counterparts or the Poland counterparts. And in the mix, we also had organizations which had GBS in both the locations, and we got similar results. So that is more around the perception among the employees in different locations, even though the organization might be following similar kind of policies, but still the perception is different in different locations.
And Anish, one thing I find very interesting is also in alignment with the core talent proposition, and the utilization on the unique value proposition of these locations. So relatively more, customer services teams in the Philippines, a relatively greater availability of talent with more empathy, and then that sort of kind of expertise residing there. It also shows in the general, if I may say, and again I'm tiptoeing between what is okay to say, what is not, but a more happy or a happier workforce that we see in some markets versus the other. So some of those cultural aspects, right? And again, not part of this analysis, but some other work we were doing, some of the marketing leaders we were talking to, there is this conversation, that in some cultures, less feedback is good feedback. Feedback is generally more voiced over if there is negative feedback. So some of those nuances start to show up very interestingly. Nothing which is too surprising, but interesting how it pops up in different places.
Yep, rightly mentioned. But in that sense, it no way takes away the effort from the companies which they should take on, because those are just supplementary factors which plays a role. But then, and on the organization part, you have to be proactive across all geographies to build superior employee satisfaction uh, around your brand perception. Now, as we move next, one of the interesting questions, and I know Rohit, Bharat, you might be getting this a lot, that is there a correlation between the employer attractiveness and the age of the organization? People generally believe that the longer you are in the market, the better employee perception you might have created because you're an older organization, and similarly on the size, which we'll discuss slightly later. But these are certain general uh, norms, or let's say biases which you have created, that let's say the older the organization, the better the talent workforce might be. So we did that analysis. On the left hand side, you see that we have specifically plotted for the IT workforce brand perception. On the right hand side, it's overall GBS brand perception. On both the charts, you'll notice. Let me first talk about the IT workforce. The top three employers with the highest brand perception, you notice, are blue dots, which are the youngest organizations, so 0 to 5 years old only. So we believe that age is no longer a factor in creating a better brand perception in the employee's mind. It's the elements how you counter around compensation, work culture, work environment, which creates a positive perception. So that can be again taken up by even a startup or a newer organization, and not necessarily any older organization. On the overall chart, which is on the right hand side, again, you notice similar trend. There is a mixed bag, and there is no direct relation that only older organizations are better in terms of brand perception.
And Anish, particularly on this, that's sometimes there, that because somebody has been in the market for a longer time, they are supposed to have more, a brand recall. I might say they might be more relatable, they might be well known, but there are both the positive and the negative messages echoing in the industry. That's what has come out. What is really interesting is that how organizations which have spent just a few years are trying to learn from their predecessors and trying to accelerate their way through, power through, skip some of the stages in their evolution journey, and how they avoid some mistakes. And that's a good thing about this GBS community. Everybody learns from each other. One thing I'll call out is that there are some, not all 100 or 50 organizations respectively for geographies might be represented on this chart. There are some organizations where we did not have sufficient information on their age or scale, as you'll see on the next slide. So we have avoided plotting them. But as Anish said, the analysis clearly shows that you don't need to be of a certain age, to have a certain strength of the brand.
And just to add, right, this is kind of tying in with our broader assessment. Some of you have been, you may have checked out our recent research on GBS personas and how GBS organizations evolve over time. If 5-10 years back, GBS organizations started as a internal provider and then eventually moved up the evolution curve to deliver value. Today, you're probably seeing organizations have that experience and already set up as a value-added partner for the global enterprise. So having that strategy in terms of, hey, this is what I'm going to deliver. This is how I would want to shape up my talent journey. These are the pockets where I'm going to invest in, and so on. That clarity is also perhaps bridging the gap in terms of need for a particular tenure or age to achieve a certain level of attractiveness.
Very well mentioned, Bharat. So just building onto that, and if you move to the next slide as well, it also reflects the kind of value which you are creating, right? So it, again, similar to the age of the organization, both the charts which are specific to the IT workforce and overall reflects that size of the organization is also no bar. As far as you are able to deliver the value to your organization, and if you are able to resonate that in the talent market, that you are able to provide the right career opportunities to develop, you're able to provide the right set of work which aligns to the capabilities of the employees, and they are satisfied with their opportunities of work, opportunity which they're able to fetch, they'll be happy to join a smaller organization as well. So it's no longer about that how big you are, no longer how old you are. And this again reflects the similar that even smaller organizations or startups are doing well as compared to bigger organizations. But certainly, yes, they're learning from them and they are able to accelerate faster on some of the elements which are most important in the talent market. Now, given that we've discussed a lot of nuances around geography, age, size, which affect the four levers which we have identified, Rohit, do you want to actually put how, and you have seen multiple transitions of the GBS organization, right, from one stage to another. You want to share what are the top considerations when it comes across brand perception? What are the top considerations for the GBS leader?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So as we start looking into it, right, there are multiple things that are coming out very clearly, right? So number one, I think the conversation continues to be around total rewards. It is not only compensation or benefits. And then also I want to say, we were previewing some of the results with a room full of practitioners in Bangalore a few weeks ago, very, very early when we started coming up with this report. And there was a lot of debate on compensation, but then a very important point was raised on where does it stop? And that's important. It is important to realize that organizations need to keep up, pay skills premium, adjust for inflation, take into account the competition, but you can't simply throw money and wish your problems away. Compensation alone will not solve your problems, which is where, as a correlation, as in some of the analysis that Anish and Bharat just presented, it is not the top ranking parameter. What is more important is that you need to embrace the flexibility. The rule books are not cast in stone. In fact, the theme here is that the more rigid you are, the more you will struggle. Whether it comes to remote working, whether it comes to some of the benefits that you extend to certain groups of employees, whether it comes to how can you personalize or localize some of your strategies across many dimensions, the key theme is flexibility. You really need to embrace that and be prepared to adapt in a very quick manner. There is very limited time to catch up. The market is fairly competitive and fierce right now. The third part is around continuous learning. Right now, the role of GBS organizations is elevating, whether it is across what they do in tech, operations, corporate. They are becoming growth engines. They are becoming engines of value driver for the parent organization. So as your role changes, there is also a lot of transformation that's happening. Combine all of that with automation and other things, and certainly the role of the GBS worker, an average GBS worker, is changing. It is changing fast. You're no longer hiring bodies to process transactions. You're delivering more value. As that happens, you need to facilitate continuous learning. You need to explain it to your employees, articulate, help them understand where they are heading. They need to learn and how you will facilitate them. And sometimes they will stay on, deliver value. Other times they will go out and find alternative jobs. But it is important that organizations facilitate continuous learning. In the survey earlier, career development was at the top. So most of our attendees today are actually prioritizing it. I would like to believe that, but this has also come out among the top in our research. Number 4, culture and purpose. Now, there have been few comments around culture and purpose, but we see culture and focus on culture and purpose and then this dimension has the highest correlation with organization's overall rating on that x-axis, how strong your brand is. So you need to move beyond just stating that this is important to you. You are working with a multi-generation workforce, the millennials, the next generation, workers these days, especially the younger ones, they are very particular and they call you out. They call a spade a spade. And if you're not investing enough in driving that culture, the purpose, the software aspects, it is impacting. There were questions around the impact of ESG and other aspects. It is all feeding into your values, your culture as an organization. And if you're not living up to it, your employees have other alternatives to consider, and it is starting to show. Lastly, but it's not less important, in fact, one of the most important aspect is, Bharat mentioned this briefly, is that you need to improve listening mechanisms. As we start sharing a lot of these with individual organizations, who are kind of working with us, we are realizing that often at times there are employees who are washing dirty laundry outside. They're part of your family, they're part of your organization. Do you provide enough platforms for them to share internally, resolve issues internally? That is one way to reduce the noise and the chatter outside. And why that is important to a certain extent is because while that employee, you might feel sometimes that there is a gap, there's a disconnect, something is a lost cause. How do you address that and be an organization which is considerate? How do you avoid noise outside? Because again, employees have multiple options. Talent market is a mess right now. Any negativity around your organization in the public domain is impacting you. So
in fact, just to add on that, yeah, just to add on that, right? This again is an interesting observation that we all have. We may purchase from an organization for, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. One bad experience, more often than not, that goes in the social media saying, hey, experience wasn't great. But are there enough opportunities for organizations to learn from those, address them firsthand? That is also emerging as a pretty critical aspect when it comes to addressing the overall brand attractiveness, employer attractiveness.
Perfect. So just to round this up, right? A very quick recap before we take some questions, is that just to reiterate, we have an offer for all of you. Do make best use of this. Register for this complimentary, branding check, if I may say, and you will get a report personalized to your organization. So there is the link in the chat window. You can take it from there. And lastly, as you will see, that beyond sharing the results of this research as we are doing right now, and the report will get launched tomorrow, we are also hosting a LinkedIn Live where we will bring in practitioners, some of them who have been rated among the top employers in different geographies. This is coming up on September 15th. We already have a couple of confirmations. Again, this slide went into publishing a few days back. So you see one person from SAP, but we have a couple of more confirmations. But do use the link to register yourself. We will hear real stories from these companies based on what they are doing, how they are doing it, what do they care more about or less about. And we want to make sure that those stories are benefiting the rest of the community as well. There are some more details in this document, some other interesting and related research that you can refer to. So just to recap, all the attendees will get this document, right? I see we are in the final phase of this session today. Time is always less, and we have about 10 minutes. There is a long list of questions that I have received. Let us see what can we cover in the discussion today. Again, no particular order, but a bunch of these questions, right? So taking the first question myself, right? Mata asks that will be interesting to see how the perception has changed. So Mata, definitely yes, a lot of clients are reaching out for that already. But this is first of its kind. based on analysis as of mid of 2022. We plan to repeat this analysis every year. We have done some pilots over the last few quarters, and we realize that this is based on public information. So it is hard to show meaningful differences quarter on quarter. So we'll be repeating this every year. In fact, we'll be announcing the top GBS employers across these markets every year. So watch out for that, and we'll be sharing those results, right? Bharat, let me ask another question. I'll ask this to you. Greg asks us, what about direct conversations about career development and growth? And is there active interest in planning the employee growth strategy within the company? How are these being personalized, if that's the interpretation I take, and becoming very direct conversations between the employers and the employees?
Yeah, no, Greg, that's actually a great question. In fact, the other underlying element to also look at is, hey, the value proposition is changing. The employees of today are very much interested in understanding how their career is going to progress. They're keen to know what additional contribution they can offer to an organization, especially in a GBS context where, the role for relationship and delivery and getting an opportunity to exhibit ownership takes precedence. We have heard of quite a few GBS organizations, especially some of the successful ones, do this as a formal process as well, have conversations with employees in terms of, hey, how your career could shape up, what kind of value add that can come in as they progress in the organization as well. So definitely this will continue to be a critical aspect in helping employees also feel valued, hearing their voice, and also accordingly charting their career within the organization.
Thanks, Bharat. I'm combining a few questions I see from Indra and a couple of other people, but these are around the approach. So has ESG, of ESG been incorporated here? Where does the focus on educational practices lie? So just combining both of them, right? The answer is that yes, all of that is feeding into it, but the number of or the extent of feedback on some of these aspects may vary. For example, we see a lot of feedback on education related aspects. Bharat voiced over some of that. It goes as part of the career development, overall environment, perks that companies offer in many ways. But how are you investing in your employees' development, further education? That is important, part of the answer. And ESG, etc., is falling into the culture values. We have seen some very real feedback on leading tech companies, leading banking companies about how they are perceived to be, environment friendly, kind of more socially conscious. All of those aspects are feeding it, but the feedback is increasing on these areas, but it's still not very much there. But definitely organizations which are perceived to be more responsible on ESG, there is some positive feedback around that as well. Another question on the similar thread is around, with respect to the cultural nuances, is there an impact on the ratings? Anish, you presented some analysis there. Let me ask you that. For example, in terms of there's a Western thinking and then there's thinking in other cultures. How does that impact the ratings?
So culture does play a part. Let's say Western culture is very open, right? And you seek flexibility a lot. While in some of the non-Western culture, you would also seek job stability. So in that case, it changes some of the perception. In case, let's say you're a stable organization, you're a bigger organization, you're an older organization, then you tend to have some more stickiness. While in a Western culture, you might not see that much because it's just a shorter notices. One day you just had a bad experience and you just walk out of the door and you don't want to be with the specific employer, right? So culture does play a role. But as we also saw in today's poll, right, companies did not have culture as one of the primary points to address. It is an element to address, but then there are other larger aspects which play a more critical role in direct shaping the perception in the market versus some indirect contribution.
Yeah, and just to add to this, right, the other element, in fact, we saw this on one of the slides on what drives people away is actually having wide array of cultures within the same organization. In fact, one of the biggest concerns during the pandemic was, hey, I'm hiring quite a few folks who haven't even set foot in the office floor. Now, how are they going to get integrated into the culture? So it's actually one step ahead. It's responsibility of organizations to ensure that the cultural elements are fairly uniform across the organization. And that is again going to play a very big role in ensuring broader alignment towards organization objectives, and also helping employees have clarity on, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is how we're going about doing it.
And again, I know we have many more questions, but just to add an angle to that, it has become increasingly challenging given the organization is in a hybrid model. A lot of your employees, probably 40–50% of them, joined in a hybrid manner, have never stepped inside an office. So maintaining that one org culture is also becoming kind of challenging. And then there are different interpretations in different regions. So that's where, we are seeing a significantly more focus also in practices, right? And we are happy to share some more of that separately. In the interest of time, I see a few questions around, that this is a very VUCA world, a lot of uncertainty, volatility. What are the best ways to build a brand? Watch out for the detailed report. It will be available. We are publishing a lot more on this topic. Happy to have a separate conversation on that. And also, what are organizations doing to attract, engage, and retain talent? We are publishing a lot of research on innovative practices, what is different in these areas. It's near impossible to have a short answer to that. But what definitely we see is doing companies trying to have process-specific interventions, tech-specific interventions, and people-specific, and personalizing, localizing those interventions to kind of improve in each of these areas. So there is no silver bullet. There is no magic mantra. You have to make minor changes, improvements, improvisations along the way. And that's all kind of adding up in creating success stories. We'll listen some more of these success stories in the LinkedIn Live on September 15th, but do watch out for some of our additional research on these topics. I see we have 1 to 2 minutes left. So just one last question probably we'll take. There is a question that there is there a timeline view? So I want to clarify that all the analysis we are sharing today, this is first of its kind. This is for 2022 analysis done over the second quarter, early phase of the third quarter in 2022. So think about it as mid-year. We have done this for last few quarters as we've been piloting and evolving this approach. We are going to do this every year. So think about these as the top employers for 2022. And next year we'll follow it up by top employers for 2023. With that, apologies for the questions that we are not able to take. We'll follow up with some of you, but feel free to reach out. You will have our contact details in this document, which will be shared. Thanks, everyone.